The key turned in the lock with a groan that sounded like the house itself was waking from a long, bad dream. Marta pushed the door open with her shoulder and stepped into the dim, cold silence of her childhood. Dust motes swirled in the thin light. The air smelled of damp and neglect and something sweetly rotting she couldn't identify. 20 years. She'd been gone 20 years, fleeing to the city, to a man, to a life that was supposed to be more than this. And now here she was, 50 years old, her body worse than when she'd left, her marriage a pile of ashes, standing in a house that had slowly died without her. The cerebral palsy had been kinder when she was young. Now her hips ached constantly, her legs crossing in that painful scissor gait with every step. She didn't need crutches, had refused them since her 20s, but walking was a careful, conscious effort, each step a negotiation with muscles that wanted to tighten and refuse. Outside, autumn painted the village in shades of decay. Brown leaves piled against the fence, rotting into mulch. The sky was a permanent gray, spitting occasional rain that turned the paths to mud. The village smelled of wood smoke and wet earth and something else, something old and patient and waiting. "Right," she said aloud, her voice strange in the emptiness. "First things first. The roof. For 2 weeks, she worked. The roof first, hiring a local man who looked at her with something between pity and curiosity, but took her money and fixed the leaks. Then the windows, which she did herself, scraping ancient putty and fitting new glass with hands that ached from gripping too tight. Then the walls. Painting was a particular kind of hell. She'd rig a roller on an extension pole, brace herself against the wall, and work in furious bursts until her shoulders screamed. The white paint went on like defiance, covering decades of grime. But winter was coming. She could feel it in the bones the house shared with her own. And there was still the wood. The wood pile behind the house was a skeleton of what it should be, a few scattered logs, mostly rotten. She'd need quarts of it to get through a village winter. She couldn't chop it herself. Could barely lift an axe, let alone swing it. That was how she found herself, on a cold October morning, standing at the door of the cottage next door. A young man answered. Mid-20s, maybe. Dark hair falling into his eyes. A smear of grease on his cheek from whatever he'd been fixing. He looked at her, and she watched him register the careful way she stood, the slight drag of her left foot. Yet not hostile. Just young. "I'm Marta. From next door." She jerked her head toward her house. "I need help with wood." "I'll pay." He wiped his hands on his jeans. Studied her a moment longer. Then he nodded. "I'm Jacob. And you don't have to pay. Just tell me what needs doing." He came that afternoon with an axe that looked too big for him and a quiet competence that surprised her. He worked without being asked, stacking the good wood, splitting the rest, moving through the task like it was as natural as breathing. Marta watched from the kitchen window, a cup of tea growing cold in her hand. He'd taken his shirt off at some point, the afternoon had turned warm, a last gift of autumn, and his back was smooth and muscled, gleaming with sweat. She looked away. Felt foolish. She was 50. He was a boy. And her body was a ruin. But he kept coming. Every few days, he'd appear with that axe, or with tools to fix a loose board, or just with bread his mother had baked, still warm. He'd stay for tea afterward, sitting at her rickety table, asking questions about the city, about her life, about nothing at all. His eyes, she noticed, never flickered away from hers. The barn had stood empty since her father died. Hay still piled in the loft, dry and golden, smelling of summer even as the world outside turned gray. Marta went there sometimes to escape the chaos of renovation, to sit in the dusty quiet and remember being small, being safe. Jacob found her there one afternoon, after they'd finished the last of the wood. "Thought you'd gone," she said, not turning. "Came to bring this back." He held up a hammer she'd lent him. Then he climbed the ladder to the loft, settling beside her in the hay. For a while, they sat in silence. Then, "Why do you look at me like that?" she asked. "Like what?" "Like I'm not broken." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he turned to her, and his face was serious in the dim light. "My brother had something like that." "Not exactly, but he walked different. People looked at him like he was less." He shrugged. "I try not to do that." Marta's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." "Me too." He paused. "But you're not him. You're you. And you're the toughest person I've ever met, coming here alone, doing all this with." He stopped. "Sorry. That's probably patronizing." "No," she said softly. "It's not." Something shifted between them. The air felt thicker, warmer. He was closer than she'd realized, and she could smell him, wood smoke and sweat and something clean underneath. "Jacob." He kissed her. Not gently, not tentatively. Like he'd been thinking about it for weeks. His hand cupped her jaw, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek. She should have stopped him. Should have reminded him of the years between them, of the village ice, of her broken body and his whole one. Instead, she kissed him back. It happened in the hay, in the golden afternoon light slanting through the barn boards. He was careful, so careful, asking with every touch, "Okay? Is this okay?" His hands learned her crookedness, her tight muscles, the places that ached and the places that, when touched, made her gasp. When they came together it was slow and gentle and so full she thought she might break from the sweetness of it. The hay scratched her back. His breath was hot in her ear. And for the first time in years, her body felt not like a prison but like a gift. Afterward, they lay tangled in each other, hay in their hair, dust motes dancing in the light. "We can't," she whispered. "The village, they'll talk." "Let them talk." His hand traced her hip. "I don't care. You're young. You should." "I should what?" He propped himself on an elbow, looking down at her. "Marta. I've been watching you for weeks. Fighting this house, fighting yourself, never giving up. You're the most alive person I know." She had no answer to that. So she pulled him down and kissed him instead. They met in the barn after that. Always the barn, hidden from the village, hidden from everything. She'd leave the back door unlocked, and he'd slip through the twilight, climbing to the loft where she waited. They never spoke of the future. Never named what it was. But in the dark, in the hay, she was not a 50-year-old woman with a ruined body. She was just Marta. And he was just Jacob. And for a few hours, the world outside didn't exist. Then things started to change. She noticed it first in the yard. She'd glance up from her work and see him near the well, but when she looked again, he'd be gone. Not walking away, just gone. In the house, she'd feel a presence behind her, turn, and find empty space. At night, she'd wake certain she'd heard his voice, but the flat was silent. One evening, she saw him in the kitchen from afar, standing by the stove. She called his name. He turned, looked at her and vanished. Like a light switching off. Her blood ran cold. The next day, she confronted him in the barn. "I saw you. In the kitchen. You were there, and then you weren't." He looked at her steadily. "I don't know what you mean. Don't lie to me." "You," she gestured helplessly. "You disappear. You move like you're teleporting. What's happening?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled that same gentle smile and said, "You've imagined it all." "What?" "You've imagined it all, Marta." He stepped closer, cupped her face in his hands. His palms were warm, solid, real. "I'm just a boy who chops your wood. Nothing more." She wanted to believe him. She did believe him, in that moment, with his hands on her skin. But the doubts didn't stop. The cameras arrived a week later. She ordered them online, hid them in the kitchen, the hallway, the barn. For 3 days, she watched the feeds. Saw herself eating alone. Saw herself working. Saw herself talking to empty rooms. No Jacob. Never Jacob. She checked the cameras one more time. Weeks of footage. Hours and hours of her life. He wasn't in any of it. The cemetery sat on a low hill at the edge of the village, surrounded by a wrought iron fence that had rusted in places. Marta made the slow walk up the path, her legs aching, her breath misting in the cold air. She didn't know why she'd come. A feeling. A pull. Her parents' grave was easy to find, a modest headstone, their names worn but readable. She stood before it for a long time, saying nothing, feeling everything. Then her eye caught the grave beside theirs. Newer stone. Less weathered. A name that stopped her heart. Jacob Wojciech. 1998 to 2021. Beloved son, brother, friend. 23 years old. Marta stared at the dates. Her mind refused to process them. 2021, 3 years ago. 3 years before she'd ever come to this village, before she'd knocked on that cottage door, before she'd fallen in love with a boy in a barn. She stumbled backward, her legs nearly giving way. The wind rattled the dead leaves. The sky pressed down, grey and heavy. You've imagined it all. The words echoed in her head, his voice, that gentle smile, the warm hands that had touched her but never appeared on camera. She looked at the grave, at the name, at the years that proved everything and nothing. Had she imagined it all? Every touch, every kiss, every whispered word in the hay? Had loneliness conjured him from nothing, given him her parents' neighbor's name, built a lover from grief and need? The wind answered nothing. Marta turned from the grave and began the slow walk home, her legs crossing in that painful rhythm, her body the only thing she was sure was real. Behind her, the headstone stood silent. 1998 to 2021. 3 years dead. Forever young. And somewhere in the empty barn, hay still waited in the loft.